I always felt that someday, somehow, something would happen to change everything for me, and I'd daydream about how it would be. But I never imagined it would start with a single, life-changing moment. It was a cold morning in Tupelo, Mississippi, in 1948. I was just a kid, barely 10 years old, but I remember it like it was yesterday. My dad, Vernon, and I were standing outside a small, run-down shack. We were about to move into it, and I was scared. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew it wasn't going to be easy. We were poor, and we always had been. My mom, Gladys, was already inside, trying to make the place look a bit more like home. That night, as we huddled around the fireplace, my dad told me a story. He said that every great thing in life starts with a single step. He didn't know what that step would be for us, but he believed it would come. I listened, but I didn't really understand. I was just a kid after all. A few years later, in 1953, we moved to Memphis. Things were a bit better, but we were still struggling. I was working at a machinist shop and trying to make a little extra money singing at local gigs. I loved music, but I didn't think it could ever be more than a hobby. I'd heard the blues, country, and gospel all my life, and I knew I wanted to make something of my own, but how? One day I decided to go to a place called Sun Records. I wanted to make a record just for my mom. I didn't think anything would come of it, but I wanted to surprise her. When I walked into Sun Records, I met a man named Sam Phillips. He was different from anyone I'd ever met. He had this spark in his eye, and he listened to me play. I sang a few songs, and he told me I had something special. I didn't believe him, but I felt a little bit of hope. A year later, in 1954, Sam called me back. He wanted me to record a song called That's All Right. I was nervous, but I went. I sang it, and something magical happened. The band, Scotty and Bill, joined in, and we created something that felt new and different. When we finished, Sam was smiling. He said, "That's it. That's the sound I've been looking for." I didn't know it then, but that was the moment everything changed. That night, the song played on the radio, and people started calling in, asking who the singer was. They loved it. I didn't realize it, but I had taken that first step my dad talked about. I had no idea where it would lead, but I knew I couldn't stop now. From that day on, things moved fast. We started playing more gigs, and people kept coming. I remember the first time I performed at the Overton Park Shell in Memphis. The crowd was electric. They screamed, they danced, and they loved every minute of it. I felt like I was flying, but it wasn't all easy. There were people who didn't like what I was doing. They said I was too wild, too different. They called me names and said I was a bad influence. But I didn't let it get to me. I knew I was doing something special, and I wasn't going to stop. In 1956, everything exploded. I signed with RCA Records, and my songs were playing on the radio everywhere. I appeared on TV shows, and people started calling me Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll. I was only 21, but I felt like I could do anything. I bought a big house for my family, and we finally had a place to call our own, but the pressure was intense. People expected more from me, and I knew I had to deliver. I worked hard, recording new songs and performing night after night. I wanted to prove to everyone that I wasn't just a passing fad. I wanted to make music that would last. Those early years were a blur of excitement, fear, and pure adrenaline. I was living my dream, but I was also learning that the road ahead would be full of challenges. I didn't know what the future held, but I was ready to face it. I had taken that first step, and I wasn't going to look back. I was born in 1935, and from the moment I could walk, music was a part of my life. It was everywhere in East Tupelo, Mississippi churches, juke joints, street corners, and on the radio. My parents, Vernon and Gladys, were always singing, and my dad's baritone voice filled our home with gospel and country tunes. When I was just a little kid, I'd slide off my mom's lap during church and run up to the platform, trying to sing with the choir. I didn't know the words, but I could carry the tune. As I grew older, I absorbed all kinds of music. The Golden Gate Quartet was making their first recordings, and I'd sing along with their songs. I loved country and western, rhythm and blues and gospel, but I also enjoyed popular music from singers like Dean Martin and Bing Crosby. Even Muriel Lanza's operatic songs became part of my musical world. I'd hum, sing, and play these songs. always reminding myself and others of where it all came from. I don't remember exactly when I decided to become a musician, but my dad once told me, "I haven't met a guitarist who was worth a damn." Despite that, he was the one who sang around the house, and my parents gave me my first guitar. My uncles taught me a few chords. When I was 10, I entered a talent show at the Mississippi-Alabama Fair and sang Red Foley's Old Shep, coming in 5th place. I hung around Willow Tupelo's radio station, hoping to learn a few chords from Mississippi Slim, a local celebrity. In 1948, my family moved to Memphis, a city full of new sounds. Beale Street was alive with the blues, and the radio stations played race records, which later became known as rhythm and blues. I spent a lot of time hanging around musical spots, and people remember hearing me sing and seeing me with my guitar. I started to set myself apart from my classmates, adopting a style inspired by R&B and honky-tonk stars. But the only songs I sang were ballads. My girlfriend, Dixie Locke, remembers me singing slow, emotional songs like Tomorrow Night and My Happiness. In 1953, I walked into the Phillips recording studio on Union Avenue in Memphis. Sam Phillips, the studio owner, had recorded some of the biggest names in R&B, like B.B. King and Howlin' Wolf. The studio also offered a service where anyone could make a 2-sided acetate record for $8.25. I told Marion Kasker, Sam's assistant, that I wanted to surprise my mom, but I think I was really hoping to make music and become a star. When she asked what kind of singer I was, I said, "I sing all kinds." When she asked who I sounded like, I replied, "I don't sound like nobody." I recorded 2 ballads that day, My Happiness and That's When Your Heartaches Begin. I was nervous and not very skilled, but I had a strong, passionate voice. Marion noted my name and said, "Good ballad singer, hold." I waited for weeks, but nothing happened. I started dropping by the studio to talk to Marion, and I even tried out for a gospel group called the Songfellows, but they rejected me because I couldn't sing harmony. In January 1954, I went back to the studio and paid to record 2 more songs, I'll Never Stand in Your Way, and It Wouldn't Be the Same Without You. I still hadn't improved much, but I was determined to keep trying. Then in June, Marion called and asked if I could come to the studio. I was there before she hung up. Sam had a ballad called Without You that he thought might suit me, but I couldn't get it right. Sam encouraged me, though, and over the next 10 days, something changed. He saw something in me, and his patience and belief in me would help me become who I was meant to be. Around this time, a young guitarist named Scotty Moore was also hanging around the studio. Sam liked Scotty and gave his band, Doug Poindexter's Starlight Wranglers, a chance to record. One day, Sam suggested that Scotty contact me to see if we could work on a song for a session. Scotty called me, and we met up along with Bill Black, the band's bass player. Bill's younger brother, Johnny, was one of the musicians I had hung around with in Lauderdale Courts. We started playing together, and that's when everything began to fall into place. The first time we all got together at Scotty's house was a Sunday. I remember it like it was yesterday. We started jamming through all the songs I could think of. Scotty and Bill, the 2 older guys, didn't really have a strong opinion about my singing at first, but they were definitely impressed by how I looked. I had on a black shirt, pink pants with a black stripe, white shoes, and my hair was slicked back with sideburns and a ducktail. The next night, after work, we headed to the studio. Sam Phillips, the producer, was determined to figure out what made me different. In the studio with Scotty and Bill, I tried everything I could think of. Sam recorded us doing a country hit called I Love You Because, but it didn't go well. I wasn't bad, but why do a song when someone else had already done it better? Then, toward the end of the night, something magical happened. We were just fooling around, and Scotty, Bill, and I started playing a blues song called That's All Right by Arthur Crudup. Sam was in the control room and he heard it. He stopped us and made us start over, and this time he hit the record button. We were loose and relaxed, and the sound we made was something new. It was a mix of country, blues, and something else entirely. Sam was excited. He could see it was different and special. Later, we tried another song, Blue Moon of Kentucky, an old bluegrass tune by Bill Monroe. We changed it up, made it faster and more rhythmic. Sam loved it, and said it would be perfect as the B-side to That's All Right. We recorded it a few more times, and it got even better. Scotty and Bill were worried people would hate it, but Sam knew he was onto something. Sam took a reference record to Dewey Phillips, a famous DJ in Memphis. When Dewey played our song on his show, the phone lines lit up. People loved it. I was so shy, I hid in a theater until my parents came to get me. But the song's success meant we got booked for a show at the Bon Air Club, and soon I was performing with Slim Whitman at the Overton Park Shell. The local newspaper even wrote about us, and the song was everywhere in Memphis that summer. A few weeks later, I went back to the studio to record Blue Moon, a song by Rodgers and Hart. I don't know where I heard it, but I thought it would be cool to play. We recorded it, but Sam didn't think it was right for a single. He was being careful, only releasing new songs when he was sure they were good. He believed in me, and he wanted to make sure everything was perfect. In September, we went back to the studio again. We started with ballads because I loved them, but Sam knew we needed something with more energy. We tried Tomorrow Night, a song I used to sing at home and Satisfied by Martha Carson. We worked on I'll Never Let You Go, and I Don't Care If the Sun Don't Shine, but they didn't quite work. Then we did Just Because, an old song from the 1930s. We tried it slow and fast, and Sam liked the fast version. Finally, we went back to the rhythm and blues sound that worked so well before. We recorded Good Rockin' Tonight by Roy Brown. Sam wanted a strong, simple beat, and Scotty's playing fit perfectly. We nailed it, and Sam knew it was a hit. The tape was rushed to the pressing plant, and the new single was ready to go. That's how it all started. We were just 3 guys from Memphis, but we made something new and exciting. It was the beginning of something big. I couldn't believe it. Sam had gotten us a guest appearance on the Grand Ole Opry in October. I was so excited, but when we got there, it was a bit of a letdown. We played our hearts out, but the audience didn't seem to care much. We didn't get asked back, and that stung, but Sam didn't give up. He knew we had something special, even if the Opry didn't see it. Next, we tried our luck with the Louisiana Hayride in Shreveport. The Hayride was different. It wasn't as fancy as the Opry, but it took more risks. This was where Hank Williams and other big stars had made their names. The radio station KWKH that sponsored it had a signal that reached all over the place, so it was a big deal. We played at the Municipal Auditorium in Shreveport. Frank Page, the announcer, introduced us as the young man from Memphis who had a hit song on the Sun label. He said we were only 19 years old and had a new distinctive style. The audience was surprised by our sound. They hadn't expected such a big, powerful performance from just 3 guys. They clapped and cheered, and it felt amazing. After that, Horace Logan, the manager of the Hayride, offered us a contract. It was a 1-year deal, and we were so excited. My parents had to sign it because I was still under 18. We decided to give up our day jobs and focus on music full-time. Scotty and Bill left their previous band, and we started playing shows around Memphis, mostly at the Eagle's Nest. We also did shows in other cities, but some of them were disappointing. One show at a high school in Arkansas only had 32 people in the audience. But then a DJ named Biff Colley in Houston liked our sound and booked us at the Palladium. We did so well that he asked us to stay for 2 more nights. Bob Neal, a popular country DJ, started managing us. He had a big following and helped us get more shows. We were making progress, but the second record didn't do as well as we hoped. With winter coming, Sam wanted to get us back into the studio to try something new. In November or December, we went to Sun Studio. Sam was the producer and engineer, and we recorded Milk Cow Blues Boogie and You're a Heartbreaker. The first song was a strong blues with a country feel. It had a great beat, but it didn't seem to catch on like we hoped. Maybe it was too black for the white audience, or maybe it was too familiar. Either way, we were still putting out great music, even if the audience and DJ weren't quite there yet. On New Year's Day, we played to a full house in Houston. A few days later, in New Boston, Texas, a big crowd of 500 people showed up. That's where a seasoned music man, Colonel Thomas A. Parker, noticed us. Bob Neal suggested the Colonel come to the Hayride to see Elvis perform. Parker saw something special in Elvis, especially how the girls reacted to him. He offered Elvis a spot on Hank Snow's tour, which was a big deal. We needed more songs to keep the radio stations interested, so in February we went back to the studio. We tried I Got a Woman by Ray Charles and Trying to Get to You by the Eagles, but it was Baby Let's Play House that really clicked. The song started with my unaccompanied hiccup, and then Bill's bass and Scotty's guitar kicked in. It was a bold, confident performance that showed how much we had grown. The song was a mix of black and hillbilly styles, and it was a triumph. Bob Neal organized a big show at the Ellis Auditorium in Memphis, and Colonel Parker and Sam Phillips met there. They didn't get along, but Parker saw the potential in Elvis. He had already mentioned Elvis to RCA, and even though they were interested, Parker knew it would take a lot of work to get Elvis on a national label. For now, he offered Elvis a spot on the Hank Snow Jamboree Tour. The tour started in Roswell, New Mexico, and traveled back toward Memphis. We played to big crowds, and with the radio stations promoting the shows, we started getting more airplay. Bob Neal worked hard to build Elvis's popularity, and it was slowly but surely growing. Back in Memphis, Sam was worried because the third single wasn't doing well. He wanted to record a new song to use as the B-side of Baby Let's Play House. In March, we went back to the studio and recorded I'm Left, You're Right, She's Gone. We did a slow version and a regular version, and the regular version became the B-side of the single. We were making progress, but we knew it was just the beginning. The world was starting to notice, and we were ready to show them what we had. I was just a kid, trying to make it big in the music world. Sam Phillips, the man who believed in me, was always looking for ways to make Elvis Presley even more popular. He found a young steel guitarist named Stan Kessler, who had a knack for writing catchy tunes. Stan came up with I'm Left, You're Right, She's Gone, and we gave it a shot. At first, we tried it slow with a bluesy feel, but it just didn't hit the right note. Sam brought in a teenage drummer named Jimmy Lott, and we rearranged the song to make it more country. It worked like a charm. Around this time, we were playing at places like Eagles Hall in Houston and Gladewater in Texas. I remember those shows vividly. Scotty Moore and Bill Black were always there with me, and sometimes we had other musicians like Jimmy Day on steel guitar and Floyd Kramer on piano. We played all our hits, Good Rockin' Tonight, Baby Let's Play House, Blue Moon of Kentucky, and I Got a Woman. The crowd went wild, especially when we played the songs they knew from the radio, but it wasn't all smooth sailing. Bob Neal, my manager, was trying to get me more national exposure. He booked me for a tryout on the Arthur Godfrey Talent Show in New York, but they told me I wasn't ready for the big time. That was a tough pill to swallow, but it didn't stop us. We went on a tour with Hank Snow, and it was a big deal. We played in Virginia, the Carolinas, Georgia, and Florida. People were really starting to notice us. RCA reps even came to see me perform, and they were blown away. They took my records back to their bosses, and that was a huge step forward. In July, we went back to Sun Studio to record more songs. Sam Phillips wanted to keep the momentum going. We recorded I Forgot to Remember to Forget and Mystery Train. At first, I wasn't sure about I Forgot to Remember to Forget, but Sam pushed me and we slowed it down. It turned out great. Mystery Train was a cover of a Junior Parker song, and we put our own spin on it. The song ends with me laughing, and it became one of those moments that people remember. Colonel Parker, who had been helping us, wanted more control. He came up with a deal that gave him a lot of power, including the right to book shows for me. My parents were hesitant, but in the end they signed the contract. It was a big decision, and it meant that the Colonel would be steering my career. We kept playing shows and my fame grew. I went back to places like Shreveport, where the crowd was always wild. We played Baby Let's Play House and Mystery Train, and the audience went crazy. My band had grown, and we were getting better and better. We even played a show in Cleveland, and I was filmed for a documentary, but it never saw the light of day due to union problems. Bob Neal was still trying to get me a deal with a bigger label, but it was tough. The Colonel kept pushing, promising bigger things, national TV, movies, the works. It was a tough decision, but the Colonel was making a strong case. He had a track record of success with other artists, and he believed he could do the same for me. In November, we went back to Sun Studio to record more songs. We did When It Rains, It Really Pours, and it was a good session. The music was changing, and we were changing with it. We were on the cusp of something big, and everyone could feel it. The day finally came when Sam and Elvis decided they needed a B-side for Trying to Get to You. Sam suggested a song by Sun artist Billy, the kid Emerson called When It Rains, It Really Pours. Sam had some ideas on how to make it more catchy. When we got into the studio, Sam told Scotty, "Don't make it too complicated, Scotty." But despite Sam's warning, the song turned out to be pretty complex, and we couldn't finish the session. Johnny Bernero, the drummer who played on I Forgot to Remember, remembered that Elvis paid him $50, which was way more than the usual rate. One night, Elvis went into the control booth and talked to Sam for a long time. When he came out, he told Johnny, "We're not going to be able to finish this session." What happened was that Sam had just agreed to let Colonel Tom Parker have an option to sell Elvis's contract to another label. Sam, the creative genius, might not have wanted to let Elvis go, but Sam, the businessman, saw it as a way to solve some money problems. Sun Records was struggling to keep up with the demand for Elvis's music, and Sam needed cash to start a new radio station. Meanwhile, Colonel Parker had been in talks with Sam and RCAC, and W head Steve Scholes for weeks. He didn't want a new Sun record to mess up the deal he was trying to make. If Elvis released a hit on Sun, the price might go up, and Parker might get left out. Sam agreed to give Colonel Parker an option, and Parker had 2 weeks to come up with the money. He had already put down $5,000, which he'd lose if he failed. But Parker was determined, and it seemed like everything was going his way. A few days later, at a country music convention in Nashville, Elvis was voted the most promising country male artist of 1955. People were already talking about him moving to RCA. When songwriter Me Boren Axton brought Elvis a new song called Heartbreak Hotel, he promised her it would be his first RCA single. Colonel Parker had only 3 days left to complete the $40,000 deal for Elvis's contract. He managed to get some help from the Aberbach brothers, who owned a song publishing company, in exchange for a share of Elvis's songs. RCA finally agreed to the deal, and on November 15th, just before Parker's option expired, the deal was finalized. On November 21st, everyone gathered at the Sun studio to sign the papers. Colonel Parker had done it. He had placed Elvis on the path to stardom. RCA wasted no time promoting Elvis. John Burgess, the manager of sales and promotions, sent out more than 4,000 promo records to radio stations and ran full-page ads in Billboard and Cashbox. By mid-December, the single, I Forgot to Remember to Forget, Mystery Train, started climbing the charts again, heading for number 1. RCA had paid a record amount for Elvis's contract, and they were eager to see a return on their investment. On December 19th, Elvis signed on to appear on the stage show on CBS TV, starting in January. With national TV appearances lined up, Elvis was quickly becoming one of the most publicized recording stars of 1956. Colonel Parker, who had taken over Elvis's management from Bob Neal, was excited about the future. He and RCA promotion man, Chick Crumpacker, agreed that Elvis was a great showman, but needed some polishing. Elvis hit the road again, playing non-stop through the Mid-South. He played at Bob King's Club in Arkansas, where he performed Heartbreak Hotel for the first time. He also toured with Johnny Cash and Carl Perkins, often playing in small auditoriums and schoolhouses. He honored his contract with the Louisiana Hayride, performing his Sun hits and covers of popular songs. Steve Scholes, who had signed Elvis to RCA, was busy finding songs for the upcoming recording session in January. He sent 10 demo records to Elvis's home in Memphis, asking him to listen and choose his favorites. On January 10th, Elvis and his band arrived at RCA Nashville studio. Chet Atkins was there to play rhythm guitar, and Floyd Kramer played piano. Ben and Brock Spear and Gordon Stoker were on stand, by to sing backup on the ballads. Elvis started with I Got a Woman, a Ray Charles song he'd been performing live. It went smoothly, and they had their first RCA master within an hour. Next they tackled Heartbreak Hotel, which Elvis had been playing live for months. With a few takes and some lyric changes, they had their first hit. The evening session was spent on Money Honey, another song from Elvis's live set. They couldn't get a perfect take, so they spliced 2 good ones together. The next day they recorded 2 ballads, I'm Counting on You and I Was the One. These ballads were a new direction for Elvis, and Chet Atkins helped with simpler arrangements. Elvis was proud of his vocal performance on I Was the One. Despite the challenges, Elvis was happy with the results. He had recorded a song he believed in, remade some R&B classics, and recorded ballads with his band. Back at RCA in New York, the reaction was not as positive as Elvis's. The executives thought the sound wasn't as crisp as Sun's, and they suggested he might have signed the wrong Sun artist. Carl Perkins's Blue Suede Shoes was becoming popular, and some thought RCA should focus on him instead. Steve Scholes knew he had to do better, but Elvis was satisfied. He had taken control in his first RCA session, and he was ready for the next chapter in his career. I watched Elvis carefully as he stepped into RCA New York studios. It was a big moment for him and for me. I was Steve Scholes, Elvis's producer at RCA, and I had a lot riding on these sessions. I had just bought all of Sam Phillips's Elvis tapes from Sun Records to prevent Sun from riding on RCA success. But I also thought those rejected tracks could be great for an album. If Elvis turned out to be a flash in the pan, I could always fall back on those Sun titles. Elvis had a big TV gig coming up 4 shows in 2 months. This was our chance to make something happen. Elvis believed in Heartbreak Hotel, so I decided to make that his next single. But I wanted a backup plan, so I scheduled another session for January 30th, just 3 days after Heartbreak Hotel would be released. When I called Sam Phillips to share my doubts, he told me to be patient. He gave me his blessing to let Elvis record a version of Carl Perkins's hit Blue Suede Shoes, but only as a last resort. I was grateful for his advice, but I still needed something more concrete. So I brought Elvis to New York for more than a week to do promotion and record. The first day in the studio, January 30th, was tough. Elvis seemed hesitant and stiff as we recorded Blue Suede Shoes. Maybe he felt uncomfortable covering a song by a former Sun artist, or maybe he sensed the doubt in the air. It took 10 takes to get it right, and even then it was different from the original. The energy and toughness were there, but it lacked the natural swing of the Sun recordings. Next we tried My Baby Left Me, a song by Arthur Crudup. Elvis knew this one well from his days on the Louisiana Hayride. The feel was close to his Sun recordings, and it came together nicely. The band and I stuck to what worked, and it paid off. One-Sided Love Affair was the only other new song Elvis liked, and we did our best to beef it up. Elvis threw in all his vocal tricks, and Shorty Long played some serious boogie-woogie. The result was great. The last song of the day, So Glad You're Mine, was another Crudup cover. It fit Elvis perfectly, and he sounded totally confident. The band played better than I expected, and the song had a lot of energy. The next day, we recorded 2 more songs. I'm Gonna Sit Right Down and Cry Over You was a cover of a Roy Hamilton song. Elvis did a fantastic job, capturing the bouncy swing he'd shown at Sun. Then we tackled Little Richard's Tutti Frutti, which was a favorite at live shows. This time it leaned more toward a cleaner, almost northern sound. Elvis seemed a bit rushed, but it still had a lot of energy. 3 days later we were back in the studio. Elvis took on Lloyd Price's Lottie Miss Claudie and Big Joe Turner's Shake, Rattle, and Roll. Both songs were challenging, and it took a few takes to get them right. I had some concerns about the lyrics, especially in Shake, Rattle, and Roll, so we left out a verse in Shorty Long's piano solo. Elvis and the band overdubbed backing vocals, which was a new technique for us. At the end of the sessions, I still had some doubts. I wrote to Colonel Parker that Lottie Miss Claudie and Shake, Rattle, and Roll wouldn't be suitable for singles, but they would make good album material. I was worried about when we'd get Elvis back to cut a proper single, given his busy schedule. The TV appearances were crucial. The Dorsey Brothers stage show wasn't the hottest thing on TV, but it was a big deal for Elvis. We timed the release of Heartbreak Hotel to coincide with his first TV appearance. For the first 2 shows, he performed covers of R&B songs, and the performances were high-powered. The audience saw a wild, almost bizarre young man, making faces and shaking his legs in a way that was more like a Southern Baptist revival than prime-time TV. On the 3rd show, Elvis finally performed Heartbreak Hotel. The first time, the Dorsey Orchestra tried to fill out the song, but it didn't work. The band was offbeat, and even Elvis got caught up in the confusion. But on the third show, his performance of Blue Suede Shoes was much better. The EP I prepared around Blue Suede Shoes was a safeguard, and it worked. As Elvis prepared for his next TV appearances, I knew we had something special. The TV shows were giving him the exposure he needed, and the recordings were coming together. I just hoped we could keep the momentum going. The Colonel, my manager, was always thinking a few steps ahead, especially when it came to my career. By the time of my third TV show, the option for 2 more appearances at $1,500 each had already been picked up. But the Colonel knew we needed to get out of the deal with the Louisiana hayride. He eventually chose a $10,000 buy, out over sending me back to Shreveport almost every week for such low wages. With my TV performances well underway, the Colonel's gaze was already moving westward to Hollywood. He had a long-term relationship with some bigwigs at the William Morris Agency, but they were slow to take me seriously at first. Now they were trying to make up for it, and there were other opportunities to consider, like performing in Las Vegas, which could show the entertainment industry that I had really made it. While the Colonel was busy plotting, I was on the road every weekday, performing in a different town each night, often doing more than one show. Meanwhile, at RCA, my producer, Steve Scholes, was pushing to get me back into the studio to record more music. The first album, simply called Elvis Presley, was doing well, and we needed more material to keep the momentum going. We were also planning personal appearances in New York, the Midwest, and Los Angeles, where my records hadn't yet taken off. In March, rock and roll burst out of its southern roots and hit the mainstream. Both Heartbreak Hotel and Carl Perkins's Blue Suede Shoes entered the Billboard charts. The following week, Heartbreak Hotel jumped 40 places, but Blue Suede Shoes was even faster, reaching number 23 and becoming the anthem of a generation. Steve Scholes was worried at first, but both records kept rising. On March 17th, during my 5th TV appearance, I sang Heartbreak Hotel and Blue Suede Shoes, and even repeated Heartbreak Hotel by popular demand. The next day, I flew to New York for another show, while my band made a stop at a hospital in Dover, Maryland, where Carl Perkins was recovering from a car accident. I sent a telegram offering my help, and then I performed Money Honey instead of Blue Suede Shoes on the show. A few weeks later, I was back in the studio in Nashville. The flight there was a bit of a disaster. The pilot got lost, had trouble with the fuel tank, and we had a few other mishaps, but we made it to the studio. Steve Scholes was there to present me with a gold record for Heartbreak Hotel, and a Life magazine photographer was there to capture the moment. We had a tough time recording I Want You, I Need You, I Love You. It was a ballad with a beat, but it didn't feel right, and we had to splice together different takes to get it right. After just 3 hours, we flew back to Memphis for a brief visit with our families before hitting the road again. The next big moment was my 2-week engagement in Las Vegas. The audiences weren't the young teenagers who usually loved my music. They were more into the other acts on the strip, but I still had a good time. I watched Freddie Bell and the Bellboys perform Hound Dog, and I loved it. When I left Las Vegas, I started including Hound Dog in my live shows. In June, I was back on The Milton Berle Show in Los Angeles. I performed without a guitar and really let loose, especially with Hound Dog. The audience went wild, but the next day, the press called it vulgar and obscene. My next TV appearance on The Steve Allen Show was almost canceled because the network wanted me to tone it down. They even made me sing to a basset hound in a tuxedo, which was pretty embarrassing. But a few days later, back in Memphis, I stood up and said, "Those people in New York are not going to change me none. I'm going to show you what the real Elvis is like tonight." After that, I went back to the studio in New York. We recorded Hound Dog and Don't Be Cruel, which became one of my biggest hits. The Jordanaires, my new backup singers, were there, and we all worked hard to get the sound just right. It was a busy time, but everything was coming together, and I knew I was just getting started.